Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. I have a feeling we might have a little fun today.
I think so. So let's get started with your backstory. If you could just tell our listeners what led you to doing the work that you are doing today, coaching. You weren't always a coach.
So, how did I go from being celebrity radio DJ Stevie Knox, and by the way, the very first automated voice, long before Siri, I was
Ah,
to listen to your messages, press one.
oh,
To
that's
move your
fabulous.
bananas to the belt, right? So, how did I go from that to being an integrative hypnotist and coaching
Right.
all of this? Uh, Necessity, like having to reinvent myself and going through a pretty challenging time in my life.
Hmm.
My husband became ill. I had stopped my radio career and was home with the kids. My husband was told he needed a liver transplant or he was going to die.
Yeah, major
That'll make you
challenges.
look at okay, now what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. It's not just his experience, it was your experience as well. So we'll get to all of those things because I have to talk about each one of them individually. They're all so fascinating. And I wanted to begin with the DJ experience. So I have no idea. I can only imagine what it would be like to be a celebrity DJ. I think that sounds so fun, but it's also a really different lifestyle, right?
Yeah,
Can you just
yeah.
describe what that lifestyle was like? Maybe the late nights, was there stress involved, a different kind of stress? What was
Oh
your
yeah.
life like then?
Well, so first of all, let's like back up even before.
Hmm.
So, everybody talks about law of attraction, or a lot of people talk about law of attraction now, right?
Hmm.
When I was 14 years old, nobody was talking about the law of attraction. And yet I knew I wanted to be a radio DJ.
Hmm.
And literally, there was a woman named Maureen Flaherty who was on WYSP in Philadelphia. I grew up outside Philadelphia, and I am part of the Lucky to Be Alive Club. At 14 years old, I was hitchhiking to the train station,
Oh
right?
my
I
goodness.
know now, like, and some people listening might be like, what's hitchhiking, right? Because that was
Right,
so long
exactly.
ago.
Yeah.
But I would hitchhike to the train station to go down to Center City, Philadelphia, and hang out at the radio station because I knew I wanted to be a radio
Yeah.
DJ.
Yeah.
So you don't start on the radio in Philadelphia. So
Hmm.
I literally packed up what little belongings I had. I drove to South Florida and I got on the radio. And oh my gosh, it was so fun. Like it was
Hmm.
just such a fun party lifestyle, totally carefree. I loved it. And yet, of course, there's stress in anything you do, right?
Yeah, of
So,
course.
first of all, the fact that there's traditionally not a lot of stability in radio. So, I married my boss. My husband and
Oh.
I met, he hired me at the radio station. And so, being young and naive, I was like, oh, my career will follow yours. So, I followed him along with our kids out to Portland, Oregon, which is where I did my last radio show. And it was the morning show. And my kids, who are now grown and flown, they were little at the time. And my son was still in diapers. They were that little. And doing the morning show, I developed insomnia. And anybody
Ah.
who's ever experienced that, who just heard that word, a shiver went through
Hmm.
them. Have you experienced
I
it?
have, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely
It is.
debilitating.
That's the word that came to my mind. Yeah.
Right. So I found myself in my kitchen smashing my kid's bag of Cheetos because I couldn't function. Right.
Hmm.
So I did what most people would do, and I go to the doctor. The doctor gives me a prescription. This is, oh, by the way, the insomnia is because of your anxiety. What? I did not realize the first half of my life that I had struggled with anxiety because I thought it was
Yeah.
natural to walk around like this, right?
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
people didn't talk about anxiety.
oh no, oh no, no. Because when the medicine helped for a short time and then it failed me, then I
Hmm.
started like, all right, I'm gonna go see what I can do for myself. And I started going old school. This was before Google.
Yeah.
I went to the libraries and I was checking out cassette tapes, or if
Hmm.
there was like a magazine. There was very little research about it. But I knew that I had to be able to find some ways to be able to help myself calm the stress and anxiety,
Hmm.
which was hand in hand with the insomnia.
Yeah.
I started finding these ways, and this was back in the 90s. And literally, I happened to be on a teleclass with Gary Craig, a Stanford trained engineer. And it was on a phone that had the curly cord,
Hmm.
phone was bolted to the wall. And he was talking about this crazy new tapping thing that
Oh,
he
yeah.
with emotional freedom technique.
Hmm.
And I was desperate. I was like, I'll try
I'll try
anything.
anything, tap all the spots. Yeah.
Right. And I got relief. And I was
Hmm.
able to start sleeping again. I was able to start calming, my stress and anxiety. And so now I'm not on the radio anymore. I am a stay-at-home mom. And I'm telling people, oh my gosh, let me tell you about this. And I'm watching their eyes glaze over like,
Yeah.
easy. So, whatever. I kept doing it for myself. And then we cross country moved again from Oregon to Connecticut, where we still live now. And shortly after we got here, my husband was told, you need a life saving liver transplant.
Oh my goodness.
And he went in and out
Yeah.
of liver failure at least a dozen times. And every time he was this close to death. And I appreciate you asking this because so many people don't look at the caregiver and
Yeah.
how it affects them. They look at, in some ways, I think it might have been a little bit easier on my husband than it was on me because
Hmm.
he was just like going through the motions or
Yeah.
whatever. But he thankfully just passed his 19th birthday. He did get a life-saving liver transplant, and in the ensuing time, it got me to reinvent myself. So I recognized that Carrie Craig was featuring a lot of people in his tapping his EFT newsletter who were also hypnotists. And I
Mm.
was like, hmm, I
Yeah.
think I need to check that out. And I'd already been doing coaching school because, again, cutting edge technology in
Right.
2000, 2001, I could go to school to be a life coach on the internet. And then I started in hypnosis. And on the first day, it was like the skies opened, the heavens parted, because I really was like, this is that powerful to be able to help people make these changes that I had been struggling with.
Hmm.
And literally before my training was over, I had rented an office, I'd gotten a phone, I got a website, and I just knew that this was so powerful. And that was over 17 years ago.
What was your own experience with hypnosis like that it impacted you so strongly?
Well, so I had done a lot of, traditional stuff that people do, and I had one particular experience that really has informed how I practice,
Hmm.
and it was with a therapist. It was before I knew about hypnosis, and I do not fault the technique that she was doing. I didn't go to one of the best therapists. Right? In
Hmm.
any practice in any modality, there are people who are really good at what they do. There are people who are not. And this woman had me, re-traumatized. Like, oh, okay, now we're going to have you go through the trauma that you
Yeah.
experienced as a child. And I was like, this is not helping. So when I experienced hypnosis, and like, for the first day, we were experiencing hypnosis, and I was like, you can change that quickly.
Hmm.
And sometimes, literally, sometimes you can have these amazing breakthroughs in one session. I never book just one session, and I never hold that out because if I say, oh, yeah, we can get this in one session and it doesn't happen, then not only do I feel like I've failed the client, it then adds to the client's distress of feeling like, now I have failed again.
Right.
And they haven't. It's just maybe I haven't found the right door in yet.
Yeah. And how about maybe describing a little bit about what hypnosis is actually like when you're going through it? I've gone through it myself, and I think it's wonderful, but I think a lot of people think that you're going into this trance and you have no idea what's happening around you, and they're gonna, make you do a song and dance or whatever, and you just don't have any awareness. But it really isn't like that at all.
Right, not at all. I have no control, and nor do I want it. I'm all about empowering people. And if you don't mind, Carrie, if we could just take a short little bit of time to have an experience, as long as somebody's not driving, I'll invite you and
Yeah,
listeners to close your
I
eyes
would love
or just
to.
let them come to a soft gaze. and we're going to play in your imagination. And
Great.
so I want you to just imagine that you and I are sitting across a table from each other. Maybe we're having lunch or iced tea or an afternoon beverage, whatever. We're just hanging out. And for some odd reason, I reach into my purse and I bring out a lemon. Only it's not just any lemon, it's a Costco lemon. So it's huge. And whether you see this as a picture in your mind's eye or you simply imagine, you can imagine this thick, yellow, dimpled skin and the two little pointy sides, right? And so now imagine that I start rolling it around on a cutting board that has magically appeared on the table in front of me. So I'm rolling it around to loosen up the juices, and maybe you can get a little hint of that lemony fresh smell. And then I take a very sharp knife and I slice it in half, and the juices start spraying. Perhaps you notice feeling some of the drops touching your skin. And now you can get more of a scent of that lemony fresh smell. And now, Carrie, imagine that you pick up one of those halves and you bring it up under your nose, and whoo, now you can really smell that, right? And so now, imagine that you open your mouth and you take a big, juicy bite out of it. And what just happened? What happened in your mouth, Carrie?
You can taste it.
Right. So open your eyes, and we're just in our imagination, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's hypnosis. It is tapping into the power of our subconscious mind. And if I said to you, okay, well, it's a focused state of awareness, and we get into, your subconscious mind that doesn't know the difference between real and imagined. Like, great, what does that mean? Now
Mm-hmm.
that you have that experience, it's like, ooh, I'm just imagining this, and my mouth is puckering up. Then you really can start to understand if that can happen, that opens
Yeah.
up possibilities to, that's where 95%, I think they used to say 90%, but with the digital age and how much we've got going on here, our attention, our conscious attention is shrinking even more. So I think it's about 95% of our brain activity is in our subconscious mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that leaves 5%, which isn't very much. When you want to
Yeah.
make a change and you're relying on that 5%, which also has to take in the bandwidth of everything else, it's why diets don't work, because we're relying on willpower. It's why
Mm-hmm.
all these things, we start with the best of intentions on wanting to make change, and then we don't, again and again and again. And a lot of times we kick ourselves. We think that, we're failures, we're doing it wrong. And it's just because we haven't found how to tap into this incredible power that we already have within us.
Exactly. I think that's the important part. It's the power that we already have within us. And that's the key to it. And because I'm very open to this, I was able to immediately get the sense and picture everything you were saying. And my mouth started to water right away because I love lemons. And I could already smell it. But I'm sitting here doing a podcast, so I'm not in my most relaxed state. Certainly, I'm sitting here with headphones on and that kind of thing, and knowing that I'm recording this and all of these things. So if it can work that well for me in that circumstance, imagine what it could do for someone relaxing and really allowing
Well,
themselves to float into it.
and we don't need relaxation to experience hypnosis.
Hmm.
All right. You just were saying you weren't totally relaxing, you were
Mm-hmm.
experiencing it anyway. Anybody who's ever driven somewhere and gotten
Yes.
to their destination, and how did
How
I
did I
get
get here? I
there?
don't even remember going past all these landmarks. Yeah.
Right. It's literally called highway hypnosis. Again, my
Mm-hmm.
kids are grown and flown. When my daughter was 16 and doing driver's ed, she came home one night saying, Mom, we talked about highway hypnosis.
Yeah.
So most people listening have experienced that. Like, oh, okay, I thought there was something, not good about that. Another great example is when you're going, if you go to the movie theaters or you're sitting at home and you're watching a movie on the big screen TV, and they want you to jump and you find yourself jumping, or they
Mm-hmm.
want you to cry and you start tearing up. Well, it's just because for that moment in time, it's that focused state of awareness, and you forget that you're in a movie theater or you're in
Yeah.
your living room or whatever, and you forget that they're actors and actresses. So we don't need the relaxation. I was so incredibly blessed. I didn't know, about intuition and listening to the hunches and stuff until after I started my hypnosis practice. And that really also had a lot to do with it. So I live in the state of Connecticut and I was looking for hypnosis trainings. And
Mhm.
I could go to a weekend class and I would get a certificate saying I was a certified hypnotist. And I was like, I'm not really sure that's quite enough training to be helping people, access the power of their mind. So I found a brilliant woman in New York City, which is an hour and a half, 2 hours from here. And she offered this robust, training. So I am not a city person. Like in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, it's about as noisy as can
Yeah.
be. There's sirens and horns and all of this. And she's teaching us how to do self hypnosis in the midst of all this. And she's
Mhm.
teaching her clients who are strap hangers on the subway how they could be standing, holding on to the subway strap and going into hypnosis. So
Mm.
it was like, oh, okay. When I had my office for 10 years, I had a lovely office. And I had the coolest chair. We called it the hypno chair. And it was like a glider, and I would be,
Mhm.
gently, nudging. So I would give people that full experience, but it's not necessary. That's the thing
Mhm.
is, people think, and what you alluded to at the beginning of people think that, you check out, like you're not going to hear
Mhm.
anything. And if somebody says, oh, well, I heard everything you said, well, then the hypnotist itself didn't do a good job explaining to you what hypnosis is because,
Yeah.
then that, yeah, you're going to hear everything. I've had people ask me over the years, can you help me have amnesia for this? And I know stage hypnosis, and I know, if you've ever been to a stage hypnosis show, like they made her forget her name. Well, it's not like, they don't remember their name for the rest of their lives. It's for that moment in time. Then they go out in the lobby and you say, oh, what's your name? And
Mhm.
you say your name. So when people have asked me to experience amnesia for something, I don't want to help you do that because what I want to do is help you take the sting out of it. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
When we, and, I'll say just for myself that I had, experienced quite a bit of trauma in my childhood and I still remember it, but it no
Mhm.
longer has any kind of a charge to it for me. And
Yeah.
for me, that's my personal freedom.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And really, you don't necessarily want to always be in a relaxed state because you need to be able to access this when you're in a heightened state, right? When you are riding along on the subway or whatever it happens to be. So if we could move into your coaching. So I'm assuming that your coaching and your hypnotherapy kind of go hand in hand. I wanted to know what kind of client tends to gravitate toward you, and why do you think this type of person tends to find you? Because we attract certain people.
Um, Most of the time I'm attracting people, women that are, in my age bracket. But then also I will attract younger people too. And I am blessed that over 10 years later, I still have a local pediatrician who sends me her patients who,
Oh,
so I have my
yeah.
okay. Sweet little thing. You can see that this is, since the pandemic, sitting there getting a shot. And she used to have to be held down by two adults, kicking and screaming to get her shots. And the reason this pediatrician keeps sending me her young patients is because then they come back and they sit there nice and calm like that. And I had worked with an entire family at one point.
Mhm.
One of the kids, it was for her fear of shots. I literally went and met them at the pediatrician's office. And I'm sitting next to this girl as she's getting the shot. The nurse thought I was the mom, and she goes, what did you do, mom? And I said, I'm not mom, I'm her hypnotist. And she was like, what? But so when I am able to help, whether it's her at like 11 years old or the oldest person I've worked with so far was 82. She
Mm.
was desperate because she was dealing with irritable bowel syndrome, which, I'm sorry, it sounds kind of gross, but it was debilitating for her.
Yeah.
And at 82 years old, she was brave enough to say, I don't want to live like this anymore.
Mhm.
And so she came and, we were able to resolve her issue. And I got an email from her saying, oh, I made a mistake. And for the first time in my life, I didn't get stressed out. I didn't get upset. I just realized I made a mistake and kept on going. And
Mhm.
so a lot of times people come to me because I'm their choice of last resort. And people have told me that, and I don't get
Mhm.
offended by it. It's okay. I understand for most people, hypnosis probably isn't the first thing that comes to mind. But people who, who have contact with me, first of all, get that warm, caring vibe that, you know, I'm only looking out for what I can do for you and how I can help you achieve where you want to get. And I call myself an integrative hypnotist
Mhm.
because it's hypnosis, it's coaching, I'm a yoga teacher, so I bring some of those philosophies in. I've done more trainings than I could ever keep track of. And it's not because, ooh, I need more certifications. It's because literally tapping was the first thing that I learned. If that's all
Mhm.
I knew, I would have failed clients over the years because sometimes people are like, well, it doesn't work for me. Oh,
Mhm.
okay. So let's go in this direction. But
Yeah.
once you, especially when I work with people with any kind of fears, and boy, can I tell you, we're all aware that our mental health has been impacted by the past couple of
Yeah.
years, right? So we're seeing an increase in anxiety, we're seeing an increase in depression, also seeing a marked increase in fears. And so I I see it as the fears have already been there. It's just everything else. It's like been pouring gas on the fire and they've exploded. So if someone had a fear of driving on a highway, they could white knuckle it, they could get through it. And
Mhm.
then it got harder and harder. And now instead of spending 35 minutes to drive to work, they're spending 2 hours because they have to stay on the side roads. So once we are able to resolve that and get to the root cause of it, um, it's like, whoop, okay, it's out. It can never go back in. I can put it back in the box, and for somebody who's listening and didn't see what I just did, I popped a tissue out of a tissue box. And yeah, I can stick it back in the tissue box, but it won't go back in the same way.
Mhm.
So once we heal the root cause of whatever that fear was, it's gone. It doesn't have an expiration date like a half and half carton. It's okay, now you're free of it. And again, you don't have amnesia like, oh, but you don't really think about it because it's just like, your new normal is I get in the car and I drive on the highway. No big deal.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, what
Yeah. I like that description that it's still there, but I'm picturing the tissue in the tissue box. It's never going to fold over perfectly the way it was. And I'm,
exactly.
I'm also thinking in terms of my own experience, and I know friends of mine and my sister, we've all had our own kind of strange, and I say they're strange because these things seem to almost pop up out of nowhere in the 40s, right? Like when you're in that perimenopausal
Yeah.
wacky state, right, where hormones are wreaking havoc and everything else. I developed just I've always been an anxious person. I always say that I've had anxiety since I was like in utero. I don't think I've ever remembered not having it. But
Can I
having,
interrupt it? Can I interrupt and
yeah,
ask you a quick question?
yeah,
Was your mom anxious?
I think so. Yeah. I don't know that she would have called it anxiety, but yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I ask you that because I also have said I contracted anxiety in the womb. And B, my experience has been anxious kids have anxious moms.
Mm-hmm.
Usually it'll be an anxious dad, but it's usually anxious kids, anxious moms.
Yep. Yeah.
Sorry to
Oh
interrupt,
no,
but
all the way to my grandmother for sure.
okay.
Um, and some things kind of manifest, I think, when we're in those later years. My sister, when she hit her mid 40s, suddenly developed this fear of going over bridges and just like still
Yeah.
has trouble with it and has is working on it in therapy. But I mean, it was suddenly we're on vacation, I'm like, what are you, and she's freaking out and diving into the back seat. I'm like, well, this was never an issue. She was always the one who wanted to drive, and I actually developed some things around driving too, and not to go into too much TMI, but like IBD related, that's how things would manifest. So you can imagine how that would be a problem, right?
Yeah.
When you're trying
Yeah.
to travel. So
Yep.
I've
Yeah.
heard lots of different stories like this. Have you found this to be kind of common in women of middle age?
Extremely, extremely. Because what happens is, and this is why I'm talking about the root cause of the fear,
Mm-hmm.
because what happens is every time we experience anything for the first time, there's a little group of neurons in our brains that fire off. Something, the same thing happens or something similar, the same little group of neurons gets together and fires off again. They say neurons that fire together wire together. And
Mm-hmm.
so these keep happening. They keep firing off together and they get stronger and they get stronger and they get stronger.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of us women, when our hormones start, woo, kind of like a blender in our 40s, it I don't exactly know why, but it seems to exasperate it even
Mm-hmm.
more. So then, it's okay, I can white knuckle, I can, and then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I can't do this
Yeah.
anymore. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you know this from experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a question of disconnecting that wiring
Mm-hmm.
and then starting new wiring. And
Okay.
so again, that are listening won't be able to see this, but this is my favorite photo to share for you who are listening and can't see. I'm holding
Oh
a picture
my.
of a beautiful young woman about to jump out
Mm.
of a perfectly good airplane. She's going
Yeah. Oh
skydiving.
my gosh.
And she came to me when she was 19 years old for her words, crippling fear of flying. She
Mm-hmm.
was not going on her family vacation. Not,
Mm-hmm.
no, no. And so her mother, I can still see them sitting on my couch. And the mother saying, oh, we know exactly when it started. We were, and she starts giving me the details. And I smiled politely and I said, maybe, maybe not. And of course, to me, it was no surprise. It was not what the mother thought. Where we consciously, again, the conscious mind is only about 5%. We consciously think we know where something started. And my experience is more often than not, it's not that, it's something different.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, as I'm holding up this picture, this young woman must have gone on her family vacation as she's skydiving out of an airplane. She was 19 years old when we worked together and totally changed the trajectory of her life. She not only skydived and I have another picture on my website of her co-piloting a small airplane. She went on to build a very successful business as the 5-foot traveler.
Oh my goodness.
Now, obviously, that would have never happened if she
Yeah.
said that. If you look at her website, it says, I had a crippling fear of flying. So the driving, while you and your sister might feel like, okay, you know, like not too many people have this. It is so common. I wrote a blog about it one time
Mm-hmm.
because it is so common. And, when we have these challenges, we think, well, I'm the only one and nobody else has this. And the fear of driving, whether it's driving on the highway, driving over bridges, driving on a left-hand exit,
Mm-hmm.
like driving past the Jersey barriers, the little concrete
Mm-hmm.
barriers when they're all different little triggers, and none of them are the same because each of us are different.
Mm-hmm.
So one of my driving people who immediately comes to mind was a man who was in his 40s or 50s, and he couldn't drive on the highway. And he particularly had a difficult time merging onto the highway. And it goes back to he was like 5 years old, sitting in the back seat of the car. His father was driving, merging onto the highway, had a panic attack, freaked out, had to pull over, change places with mom, and mom continued to drive them home. So, all right, he's 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
His father freak out, whatever, doesn't think anything about it. As time goes on, it gets harder and harder for him to drive on the highway. So again, it's those neural pathways
Yeah.
really digging that deeper and deeper in. So what's so fascinating to me and exciting to me is, oh, we know that we've got these neural pathways. and we can build new neural pathways.
Mhm.
Hard. It doesn't take years of, like building it up. Once we're able to find out where the root cause and do that healing, then the new neural pathways that we put down go down very fast.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I totally believe it and agree that that is true. And in fact, I was talking to a friend who, she's not any kind of coach or therapist. She's more of like a spiritual healer, but we're just friends. And she does readings and things like that. And we were talking about just my anxiety issues and how they've resolved themselves or not, or, I just tend to force myself through situations. And she said, I really think you need to try hypnosis. She had just said that. And I thought, well, that was already in my mind, it's just something I wanted to try. So it's funny that, people like you tend to be coming to me on the podcast too. I think
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, and one of the things that you just touched on it, if you don't mind, I'd love to expand
Hmm.
on a little bit, is, that I forget exactly the words you used about how, you just deal with it and try and push your way through it. Um, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? We don't have this fear of or this anxiety about over here and then everything else is fine. It's all
Yep.
interconnected,
Hmm.
which is why I was a radio DJ. I never thought of myself as a writer. I had no intention of writing a book. And yet
Hmm.
in January of 2018, I heard a whisper that said, write the book.
Hmm.
And Goodbye Anxiety, Hello Freedom literally birthed out of me. It was such an easy process, easier than birthing my two kids. And it's because I already had most of this in me
Hmm.
from my practice of it's not about taking this time separate and let's work on this. It's about finding simple ways to calm your stress and anxiety throughout the day, throughout the
Yeah.
week, throughout the month. And when March 2020 hit, I literally had a presentation for an organization of 10,000 members that I had contracted to do in January. And a week before I was supposed to do this, I saw what was happening because of my husband's transplant status. He
Hmm.
is as high risk for COVID as you can
Yeah.
get, like, very bad effects from COVID. So I'm looking at what's going on in Italy, and I was like, oh my gosh, I saw what was coming down the pike.
Hmm.
So I asked the woman in our tech check 1 week before this big presentation, how flexible are you? And I watched her face turn white. And I said, the shit's about to hit the fan. Sorry if I'm, going to be bleeped out.
No,
Um,
you're good.
and, and I want to blow up my presentation because I really want to double down on the real skills I can teach your members that are going to help them to navigate what's coming. And she was game, thankfully. And I blew up my presentation and just went even further into let me teach you these simple ways. It could be something as simple as, if you would, Corinne, put your hand on your heart, like that be your bringing your awareness to your heart. And then imagine that you could breathe in and out of your heart. Now, we know with our conscious mind, our rational mind, that we're not moving air in and out, but just by breathing, imagining that we're breathing in and out of our heart. The Heart Math Institute has spent over 10, maybe 20 years researching that there are more electromagnetic currents in our heart than in our brain.
Hmm.
So by dropping our awareness into our heart, and I love putting the hand on the heart too, because it just creates that
Hmm.
kinesthetic anchor
Hmm.
for it. By doing that, we are now creating the coherence between our brain and our heart, and it calms everything down. It's getting our
Hmm.
bodies to produce dopamine, which is the happy hormone that
Yes.
we naturally produce. So, oh, how easy it is. Can we teach a 5-year-old kid to say,
Yeah.
oh, you're starting to feel anxious? Okay, just put your hand on your heart. Imagine breathing in and out of your heart. So I would invite your listeners to go, I got nothing to lose. Let me try this heart breathing and
Yeah.
see what happens. Did that with a client the other day, and I was like, okay, and what do you notice now? And I forget, she like rattled off 3 things. And the thing that was most surprising to her was she was like, I really became aware of how soft my shirt is. And, it's just about getting present. And
Hmm.
when we're present, there is no anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And I wish the 5-year-old me would have had a chance to be able to do that. Kids today are, maybe they have different kinds of anxieties, and there probably is more stimulation than when I was growing up. But wow, it would have been kind of a game changer.
So yeah, that's a perfect way for me to segue into this. And I don't talk about this nearly enough because of what you just said is, boy, do I wish that this 5-year-old had been taught, or 7 or 9-year-old. I wish as a child I had been taught
Hmm.
how to manage my emotions. I was not.
Hmm.
Ah, you want to cry? You want something to cry about? I'll give you something to cry
Hmm.
about.
Hmm.
So, because of that, I have this initiative with my book that for every paperback that I sell, I donate one to a school or organization that will teach these skills to kids, teens, and
Hmm.
young adults. Because, and I say young adults too, because our college students, um, the kids, the teens, the young adults have had the worst time of
Yeah.
the COVID
Yep.
experience. College students, I saw a survey recently that said like 85% of the college students in this survey said they had experienced anxiety because of the
For
pandemic.
sure. Yep.
So we have this crisis, and this is not to say, oh, I never say, oh, this is a cure. That's beyond the scope of my practice. But I know from, personal experience and from 17 years of experience with clients that when we can weave these in and experience these short moments of calm, I used to say many times a day, and now I say many times an hour, it helps us to be able to maintain more balance. And that's really what we're all looking for. Just because I wrote this book, I do not hold myself out as, oh, I don't ever experience anxiety.
Right.
Ask my husband, he'll tell you.
Hmm.
It means that I know it's going to come up. And when it does, I have a myriad of tools to grab from. And so, if I was to only be able to impart one thing that I would love your listeners to take
Yeah.
away, it's find one thing, just one thing, whether it's the heart breathing that I just shared with you or any other. I've got the free download that hopefully you'll put the link in the
Sure.
show notes.
Yep.
Just pick one thing and action it, and do it for a week, and notice that just doing one simple thing, simple shifts are what create lasting change.
Hmm.
If I say, if I had, and my book is only 100 pages intentionally, because if you're anxious and I say, oh, here, read this 400-page book,
Right.
you immediately go into overwhelm and shut down.
Hmm.
So, I really, and because of the pandemic, I've doubled down even more in, I need to be able to get this information to kids because they need it, desperately more than ever, not just because of all of the
Yeah.
technology and how that's, adding stress to them, but because of what they've been through with the pandemic. I
Yeah.
worked with an 11-year-old towards the beginning of the pandemic, and she was new into a middle school. So she was in a new school, new kids, and they were trying to navigate getting to know each other with masks on.
Yep.
So now all she could see were the eyes. So we worked on, getting the cues from the eyes, but they've so many challenges with the remote learning and stuff.
Yeah. And some kids didn't want to have their face. I've been a teacher for about 20 years, and I still do a little private teaching, but some of the kids just didn't want to have their faces showing for one reason or another. And yeah, you can't read the facial cues. You can't really tell what someone's feeling, what their intention is, and what they're saying to you. There just have been so many challenges with it. I found myself being unable to recognize someone without their mask on when I had met them with the mask on. I mean, it
Right,
just changes
right,
your whole face.
right. And so imagine when it's that challenging for us as adults, how it's exponentially more challenging for a poor little 11-year-old who's just
Hmm.
trying to navigate her way through middle school, which, by the way, I have yet to hear anybody say, oh, that was my favorite time of life.
Right.
Right?
Hmm. I know. I know. Well, I could certainly sit and talk to you all day. I would love to, but I
Yeah.
have to bring this somewhat to a close. Now, I always ask, well, I have two more questions. So the first one is, what has been your greatest challenge throughout your own journey leading you to doing what you're doing today? And then on the flip side of that, what has been your greatest joy?
Ah, my greatest challenge, I think, was when I had the realization that this had been something I'd struggled with and didn't know. I mean,
Hmm.
that was like, what? Right? Because that was all I know. And anybody who's listening to this who is like, oh, you know what? Maybe I am experiencing anxiety. When
Hmm.
that's all you know, like you don't know that there's a different way. I literally walked around with my shoulders up like I was
Hmm.
wearing earrings because that's all I knew. So my greatest struggle was actually coming to terms with the fact that there's still there was stigma then, there's even
Yes.
as much if not more stigma now of you know oh, okay, I like to talk about mental wellness instead of mental health because there
Yeah.
is that stigma, right?
Hmm.
So here I was hot stuff, celebrity radio DJ, and I was struggling like I share the thing about smashing my kids' Cheetos so
Hmm.
people understand that I'm not holding myself out as, oh, I've got all the answers. I don't. My greatest struggle and one of my most embarrassing moments is that I was smashing my kids' Cheetos because I couldn't function anymore.
Hmm.
My greatest joy is not that I have come to where I am, but that I'm able to help people to unlock the key to
Yeah.
find their freedom.
Yeah.
That to me, there's nothing more joyful for me.
Yeah. Amazing. So my last question, any books that you would recommend, and you can certainly recommend your own, for someone who might be interested in hypnosis or trying something to unlock the doors,
So
like you
I would
mentioned.
definitely say my book, and not out of a let me shill my book, but because um, I will say my book is fabulous, but not because I wrote it, because I had a brilliant woman edit it for me.
Hmm.
And trust me, if she hadn't, it would not get to have the 5-star reviews that it does. So I would definitely, highly recommend it. And the book's not even read to like you're not supposed to read the whole book. It's read the first 2 short chapters,
Hmm.
find a couple of techniques out of the 35 and work them, work them, work them. If you want to learn more about hypnosis, you might want to look into some of Brian Weiss's books. He is into past life regression, which some people are into, some people are not. If it's your thing, great. If not, it's your thing. If you want to get like serious into hypnosis, like maybe looking into it as a potential profession, look into any books by Melissa Tiers, Tiers, who is my mentor, who I practiced, trained with almost 18 years ago. And I still go back and dip my toe in with her now, all these years later, just because I've trained with some of the quote unquote big names in the hypnosis industry, and nobody can hold a candle to her. She's absolutely brilliant. Um, and hypnosis is not what people think. It's not, I'm going to make you bark like a dog, cluck like a chicken.
Hmm.
It's really about this wonderful opportunity to tap into what this incredible power that you don't even know you have inside. And when you unlock that, it unlocks all potential for you.
Yeah. Great.
And you can see I have no passion for this, right?
Right. No, you certainly do, and it comes through. So, Stephanie, thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared with us today. And we'll certainly put your website and information in the show notes, of course. And hopefully we'll connect again. And I think this was probably very valuable for our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you so much because I really value you as a teacher, um, because that's just absolutely joyous, brilliant gifts that you give to the world in giving to the kids who then give out to the world. So thank you for what you
Thank you
do.
so much.